because they do not meet the conditions, so we also lose creative and technical players who change their style to survive under those conditions. That's why there are so few creative players in England. Overcoming the culture is really difficult. Growing up in England, I genuinely believe that people who grew up in other countries were better footballers because it was common to hear, "Who do you think you are?" Insert the creative foreign player of that time. So, you know, who do you think you are? Ronaldo? Who do you think you are? Figo? Who do you think you are? Who do you think you are? Who do you think you are? And so I would think, okay, well, basically, indirectly, what they're saying is, you know, we don't do that here. And this wasn't about me personally, by the way. This is people that played around me who I believed at the time were really good players. And it was common, it wasn't one-offs. And I'm sure people who are watching this now, you know, you'll experience the same thing. Anyway, so they would hear that anytime a player tried to express themselves creatively, creative expectations were limited and passed on like hand-me-downs. Just as kids in school seek praise from their teachers, young players seek praise from their coaches, because the more your coach praises you, the better your chances are of starting in the team, earning a contract and progressing through the system. In short, meeting the conditions leads to you meeting your dream as a footballer. Scott Parker had a very good career, starting at Charlton, earning moves to Chelsea FC, Newcastle United FC, West Ham United FC, Tottenham Hotspur FC, Fulham FC, and 18 appearances for the England senior team. Parker started out as a technical player who worked more with the ball than without it and produced brilliant performances. Performances that led him being rated as one of the best young players in the country and representing England youth from under 16 to under 21s. And then obviously progressing into making his 18 appearances. I remember when Parker was in the Charlton reserves, entering the final stage of his rehab, and he trained with the youth team that I was in. Technically, he was on another level, on the cusp of the first team. My teammates and I could not understand why he wasn't a regular in the first team. In fact, most people couldn't understand in the club. He was rated as one of the best in the country for his age group and a regular for the England youth teams, yet he struggled to hold a regular place in the Premier League for new boys for the Charlton first team. Sorry, I meant to say the Premier League new boys. The rumour in the Charlton training ground was that the manager told Parker he needed to tackle more if he wanted to be a first team regular. So there were so many rumours flying around the training ground. I remember there was that, and I think John Soccology pulled him, you know, saying, you know, you need to tackle more. It was just so many, it was almost like being in like American high school, like Saved by the Bell. So I didn't really know what was facts, even when writing this book. So I thought, let me reach out to one of the players in Scotty's age. So I spoke to John Fortune. So this is the story which contrasts all the rumours that I heard in the training ground. I had the pleasure of playing with Scott Parker from youth to reserves and the first team at Charlton. He went from being one of the best number 10s in the country at youth level and reserves and scoring goals, creating goals on a regular basis, to being one of the best defensive midfielders in the Premier League, breaking up the opponent's attack week in, week out. Parker's transition from number 10 to defensive midfield didn't happen smoothly. While on the brink of the first team, it was difficult for Parker as a number 10 to fit into the 4-4-2 system that the first team played. So our first team manager at the time, Alan Kirbishley, told Scott that he needed to be more like Mark Kinsella, a more rounded player that tackles more and is involved in the whole game. Then, former Crystal Palace legend Mark Bright was playing for Charlton at the time. Bright took Parker to an Arsenal game. At the game, they bumped into former Manchester United legend Paul Ince. Bright told Ince that Parker was the future of Charlton. Ince asked him where he played, and Parker replied, he played number 10. Number 10? Number 10? You need to be like me, running up and down in pitch, tackling, scoring goals. None of this number 10 rubbish. That was Ince's sharp response. Some can argue, well look, he had a great career and he was amazing as a holding midfielder. But the reason why I use this example is because there are many Scott Parkers out there that drop out the game or convert their game. So we have loads of guys that can do that job, but we lose the artists. And I saw this talk on Sky Sports the other day with Carlo Ancelotti, and about him having to change his system at Juve to accommodate Zidane. And he spoke about different ways he changed his formation. So I'm not saying Scotty was Zidane, but we never know what he could have been for one. But I'm using that as an example of managers changing systems and not being rigid to a system. And this isn't a criticism of Curbs. It's just me saying, look, at the end of the day, that we are losing players. And I feel that maybe if he was in a Spain, that wouldn't have happened. Maybe even if they were playing 4-4-2, he would have found a way of being in there and being utilised and maximising his capabilities. Let's see. So what I do is, again, I go further into this. Oh, actually, I'm going to tell this bit. I think this is really powerful. Okay. As a result, Parker tackled more, a whole lot more. In fact, his game became all about tackling. He established himself in the first team, earned moves to some of the biggest clubs in England, along with 18 caps for the national team. How many Scott Parkers have there been in England? I know loads. Players have either dropped out of the game or changed to meet the conditions, which I kind of touched on. When explaining why it's difficult for a British player to win Ballon d'Or, or the Ballon d'Or, an award traditionally given to the most creative players in the world, former Everton midfielder Leon Osman spoke of the cultural expectations British players have. Osman said that he would not let a British player stand around doing the nice stuff. He would demand that they join in with the team and share the workload, because that's what you're expected to do as a British player. He also explained that when British players work as hard for the team as they are expected to, they lose their flair and all the individual skills that they could bring to the game. Things that set players apart from the rest. All right, am I going to go into the other stuff? So what I then do is I just go into a breakdown in terms of how we're slowly transitioning and how actually there's a room for everyone. So you had the England World Cup winning team, you had Tashan Oakley Booth, and you had Phil Foden. Both technically very good, but Tashan is the bigger player, Phil is the smaller player. I think Phil Foden years ago would have been that player that everyone would have spoke about, who would have known him and said, oh my God, he's amazing. But the clubs would have said, you know what, you're too small. But Phil won World Player of the Year at the World Cup, and I don't need to talk about how good he is. So it just shows that we've always produced young, good players, but if they didn't fit our conditions in terms of how we saw a player, how they should be and how they should behave and having certain attributes,